5th of October, 2025. And I was just doing another video, but the audio wasn't working too well. So I just said, forget about it and started over. And so this is a topic that I would say has got me the most, I would say, criticism regarding um, the reasons why people think that I've gone down the deep end or whatever however you say it. And it's regarding the shape of the earth. And it's something that, again, it was during the COVID era when things were getting really volatile. Like I was getting swatted, I was getting my house doxxed, I was getting people trying to break into my home and circling my block for hours. It was just a crazy friggin' time. And I have proof of all of this that I've shared on videos and things like that. And so I really had nothing to lose in my head. And so I was like, you know what, if I'm already going to be sharing a lot of information that is really not popular, especially like during the time that things are unfolding or beforehand, then yeah. Anyways, and so I did start sharing information on that, on the shape of the earth, just questions I had, and legit questions based on objective data and so many other things that I'll get into. But and so people were saying, like that's absolutely crazy. They didn't even want to look at anything or discuss anything, and I'm like, okay, you know what, that's fair. But yeah, and so this is why also, like I've said in the last 2 years, I would say, like when I moved finally, um, like my contracts, also because of myself as well, but they've been limited because it's a small community. I've worked in so many different communities for multiple different contracts. Um, but like they talk, they work together as well. There's the interoperability piece that we always, it's very important. And yeah, and so they think that I'm a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist still. And so, but again, I'm going to share the reasons why I'm still questioning things. And if people are able to provide me objective data based on repeatable, observable, and measurable data, this is what I'm saying. I always will take a look at it and attempt to analyze it from an unbiased way. And so before I get into it, I'm going to say that and this is these are all things that I have shared publicly, so you can verify this. And so regarding COVID, I've shared a lot of medical, scientific and government data regarding COVID over the years and concerns. And I finally, more and more people are aware that the fact that what we were saying was actually the truth. Okay. And so that was really not popular at the time. I had multiple accounts deleted on me. Again, I was saying like the stuff that I went through and had to do with this, but also because I was also sharing. Even in 2019, I went on Global News because I was a military advisor that they would have on the show. So I had gone on a couple of times, but because the narrative was regarding, again, like pushing a woke DEI critical race theory narrative, and trying to make it appear on mainstream media that there's more right-wing white supremacy, you know what I mean? And that's the biggest issue that we have to tackle. And so I did an interview. Someone came to my home, and and it was fine. And then when the article came out with the video, you could see like my video, they did give parts of my video, but the write-up, right? They had like a lawyer, a very prominent lawyer who I knew very well, that was on the other side of what I was saying. I was saying that it's like you have to look at cases like and isolate and not like lump an entire organization under the same umbrella or stereotype because of one individual who wasn't even in the regular force, and you don't know that like the severity or the extreme uh radicalization this guy had, even if any, right? Because he was a member of the Proud Boys, right? But like I've said, there to varying degrees, there are people who are radical or extreme and post and say radical extreme things. And so and there was no proof on anything this guy had said or coordinated that would suggest that he was some kind of right-wing white supremacist, et cetera, et cetera. But anyways, I'm not saying there aren't people out there that exist in Canada within the government. I'm saying that's true, but it's in every single organization. And if you want to look at government, where we have more of the concern for radicalization, especially far left, it is people, again, like I've said, like working in government, but the desk jobs, like Ottawa, like I'm saying, it's a swamp where like 50 to 60% of people here work government jobs, but it's not the paramedics, it's not the cops, it's not the firefighters, it's not the military, etc. And yeah, and these are also the people that are organized with radical groups and protest movements, groups, organizations, and they tip them off whenever they get information on certain protests that go against their narrative or people coming into town, um, that they hate, right? Especially Christians. And so even recently with that D&D member, again, he wasn't military or law enforcement or anything like that, and he's the one that threw the smoke bomb at the Christian singer. Anyway, he was like singing in Montreal at a church, and that got disrupted. And it's confirmed that it was this guy too, right? Because the shoes match as well for the day of the attack. I would say he should be charged as a domestic terrorist, like throwing a smoke bomb in a friggin' church at a Christian singer. Are you mad? The answer is yes. So, anyways, and so even as early as 2019, I was talking about that stuff. I was right. And this is all stuff that's only been more and more of a concern in the last year that people are speaking more about it. Digital ID. I have videos for years where I was saying that this is a concern. It's something that's going to be pushed in the West and Europe first, and then make its way into Canada and the US if we don't stop it. Because I said the same thing about immigration and the massive surge of immigration, especially since COVID. And again, these were liberal, leftist, radical tactics, knowing that the majority of people immigrating here would vote liberal under the threat that they would lose all their social services and benefits that they're getting from taxpayers if they vote conservative. So, and then people working within government, right? Like moving into Ottawa, again, in these desk jobs, like again, it was bullshit departments and organizations like the woke DEI critical race theory stuff that we're investing billions of friggin' dollars in. Yeah, these people should be fired, get a real job, respectfully. Anyway, I just get so fired up. Carbon credits, talked about that. The green energy scam. I have a text from 2021 saying to Mark Carney during his Green Fund Energy GFANS post, I said he should be in jail. And that was years before he was up for prime minister. Again, I saw the writing on the friggin' wall. And I was even saying when conservatives were super popular in the Christmas period as well, and just before that, and leading up into the elections. But then, and I'm like, you know what? It's still just by virtue of the script that still needs to be like played out, and the fact that Mark Carney has been a part of Bilderberg and WEF and EU cycles now for literally decades. Then I'm like, I don't see how this isn't something that like something's going to happen where it's gonna land on him, no matter how popular things are. And people are like, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about. And then Doug Ford had won, even though I didn't vote for him because I don't like Doug Ford. I think he's a criminal and a traitor to Canada. And I've done videos on this as to why. But yeah, and they're like, well, he won, so conservatives are still popular. And I'm like, let's see how this rolls out. And anyway, and so I'm just trying to say that there have been so many things that I've talked about where at the time it's definitely not popular. Russia, Ukraine, even before this kicked off, I have posts leading up to it saying that this is a possibility that's going to happen. Like, we can't have this happen. These are the reasons why, and then calling out things that were being shared. And so it's one thing for propaganda as part of war tactics to be shared, and like the average civilian to get duped into believing it. But it's another thing, like I said, when I have people that I know that are part of NATO, really high-ranking officers that are even in Europe, and they are sharing this information as if it's fact, and reposting posts from literal social media influencers that are paid to lie as if this is true. And then again, further eliciting emotional response and people escalating tensions, where even people I know personally had went to Ukraine as part of multiple different missions and capacities. So I knew people there that were working in and around Ukraine as part of global affairs, as part of the special forces, as part of security details in multiple capacities, and military, etc. So I had multiple people in the area that I was able to communicate with, and I was saying like like the Ghost of Kiev, like this is video game footage, like this is not real, and then with Snake Island, and with the Polish farmer, so many things, and so trying to have discussions and getting shut down, and I was right, and I offered my services as well to be on the ground to make assessments as well and assist with medevac, because again, this was a war, like a proxy war, but there were a lot of people needlessly dying, but there were also people within the Azov battalion okay, like the staged and planned coup that happened in 2014. Since that time, there have been Russian Ukrainian citizens in Ukraine that have been targeted, killed, uh, attempted to be indoctrinated, so many different things, uh, political prisoners, religious prisoners, etc., because they want to align more with Russia, or they're Russian speaking again, and targeted attacks. And so and so it's just such a chaotic environment. And so it's not black and white like people think it is. And it doesn't, and by me calling this out, it doesn't mean that I'm a pro-Russia propagandist. I've said this since the beginning. What Putin is doing is also obviously disgusting. And and it is what it is. But it's people on the ground that are the ones that are suffering, and it is the people that are part of the military industrial tech complex that are the ones that are benefiting the steering committees. So Afghanistan pullout, people were lying about the drone strike, and hitting enemy was actually civilians and children, and that was not popular. My assessment on Israel Palestine since the beginning has been correct, in my opinion, at least on the majority of things that I've shared. And yeah, that definitely wasn't popular. January 6th, I think I have more footage of January 6th than anyone that I've seen anyways. So correct me if I'm wrong, but take a look at my videos on that. The Freedom Convoy, like I've been talking about the crisis actors, paid and organized protesters, agitators, instigators, honeypots for literally years. And I said, because even when I was doing these SRDTs, these Standing Rapid Deployment Team courses for GAC and others, I hired role players, and they had varying scenarios, right? There would be the agitators, the instigators, the honeypots, the this, the that. And I've done this training not only for the highest levels of government, but I've also trained these specific roles individually for people in other courses as well, and with so many different organizations, including the Special Forces. But again, because of the videos I'm going to share, that people have thought that I've lost my mind, and I absolutely have not. The Challenger hoax, take a look at that in my videos on that. Iran-Contra, Charlie Kirk. Again, these are things that I've come at with providing actual hard evidence as to my reasonings why I think the way I do regarding these events, and so many others. And so I hope people take that into consideration when I discuss this video, because it's not going to be popular. And again, this is also something that has made people like want to stop talking to me in my community, and people I miss because they think I've gone down the deep end, and I have not. Anyways, so so what do I get into first? Actually, you know what? I'll just get into. I'll share when you do a Google search on YouTube. Is it this one? It's this one. Okay, so I searched specifically Eric Dubay, 10 things all flat earthers, and then I just left it at that. And then so these were my top searches. So you have here from Professor Dave, who I've debunked on countless videos. His video is #1 in the search. And his video is titled The 10 Things That All Flat Earthers Say. And so if you click on this video,
for people who claim that,
and you go into it, he has 4 million subscribers. So, 4 million more subscribers than me. And again, I've had a lot of accounts deleted. He's had none, which again is weird. So Professor Dave explains, 6 years ago, this video has 8.2 million views. 8.2 million views. And I'm sure he deletes a lot of these comments. But again, you look at the comments, because I like looking at the comments, over 107,381 comments. And most of them are so derogatory towards people that have a different interpretation of what this earth could possibly be. And so just very interesting. And so I'm going to go back, because Eric Dubay, he again, just be open-minded and take a look at this video just so you can understand my thought process, right? Because like there's people that have said, you're so right on so like literally everything else, but like I just can't with this. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. I totally respect that. But if you want or are interested in as to like why I think this way, then just look at some of my videos. And so anyway, so this is from Eric Dubay 5 years ago.
gravity makes no sense.
And 108,000 views. Not even close. Not even close. to the amount of views that Professor Dave has, and he debunks his video so eloquently. And again, please just come with an open mind. And actually, before I even get into that, I had questions. I was going to say, before you just dismiss this, what do you know about your model? Okay, so my questions are: does the Earth rotate or spin? What are the speeds? Can you let me know what the Earth curve calculator is? Like the calculation made for the Earth curve? Can you tell me what the circumference, the diameter, or the radius of the Earth is? How far is the sun from Earth? How far is the moon? How far are the other luminaries like Mars or Venus? Explain gravity in your own words. How does water curve? Explain to me your interpretation of the radiation belt or the Van Allen belts. There's so much more, but I'm just saying, if you can't answer those questions, then please at least stay till the end of this video. and anyways, and this is not what people that are not convinced that the Earth is a globe, at least with the model they've provided, the explanation they've provided, and the calculations they've provided, it would have to be much, 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 much bigger. And again, they have not amended their mathematics. And so, okay, we're 7 seconds in.
The 10 things that all flat earthers say. Number one extremely problematic side effect of taking the globe and flattening it out into a plane is that gravity makes no sense, and there is no reason for things to fall to the ground.
Quite simply, objects fall or rise based on their relative density to the medium surrounding them. Apples fall because they are denser than the air, while helium balloons rise because they are lighter. No gravity necessary. This is why raindrops fall down through the air and air bubbles rise up through water. Everything seeks its relative density and rises or falls until settling accordingly. This is why a tiny pebble sinks to the bottom of the ocean, but gigantic cruise ships and aircraft carriers stay afloat on the surface, because even though a pebble is so small, its mass relative to its volume, its density, is more than water, so it sinks. And even though a cruise ship is so large, its mass relative to its volume is less than water, so it floats. If Newton's apple had landed in a puddle instead of on his head, he would have seen the apple only fell through the air because it was denser than the air, but then floated on top of the water because it was less dense than water. Have you ever noticed how it's easier to stay afloat with your lungs full of air than it is when they're empty? Submarines float on the surface when their ballast tanks are filled with air, but when the vents are opened and seawater floods in, they begin to sink as the submarine's density becomes greater than water. Depending what depth they wish to dive, sailors simply adjust the ratio of air and water in their tanks, and when ready to resurface, they blow compressed air into the tanks, forcing the seawater out, lowering the density, and thus causing them to rise back to the surface. We can also prove this fact of relative density by filling a balloon with approximately half helium and half air. Since helium is lighter than the oxygen, nitrogen, and other gases that compose the air around us, filling a balloon with just the right amount of helium to compensate for and balance out the density of the plastic results in a gravity-defying, levitating balloon at equilibrium that neither rises nor falls.
All objects accelerate towards the ground at 9.8 meters per second squared. That's an indisputable fact.
Oh, really? Is it an indisputable fact that feathers fall to the ground at 9.8 meters per second squared? Is it indisputable that dandelion seeds fall to the ground at that rate? What about skydivers with an open parachute? What if we are falling through water? The rate at which things fall has everything to do with the relative densities between the object and medium, and has nothing to do with the fictional pulling force of gravity, nor does the rate or manner in which objects fall have any bearing whatsoever on the shape of the Earth.
I'm just going to add a bit to that, just regarding radiating forces versus gravitational forces, and like what we could consider to be like the laws of physics. And so this is where like my interpretation is that this is some kind of a magnetic electric cosmos or universe or reality, and there's varying degrees of where these forces are, either the ones that like are stronger, weaker, or neutral. I'm talking about electricity versus magnetism. And so with gravity, there's no interaction with where it matters what matter is being that it's interacting with a particle, a molecule, a matter, whatever you want to call it. And so to have this pulling force is what they're talking about. And so I've talked about magnetic pulling and pushing away based on just like so many different factors, and electricity as well. And so if there's some kind of a magnetic force, which is what makes up this cosmos, this is an electromagnetic reality. And again, there's toroidal fields, magnetic fields that contain this environment, right? So it would imply that like in the center, or the flat plane of inertia, like in the center, there's some kind of like strong magnetic force, right? But there's no, like, despite what people say, there's no interaction with water and like being pulled to a magnet, right? And so this is where like people are trying to make claims or assumptions that are incorrect, and they're trying to say that gravity is a force. Is it a stronger or weaker force than magnetism? I would say that it's definitely a much weaker force. So and so there's just so many more things to unpack, but I think that there's varying degrees of electric force or current, and magnetic force or neutral forces, because they balance each other out. And I don't think it has anything to do with what we're calling, again, gravity. And so I hope that makes sense, but I'll let him talk.
But this type of sophistry is the kind of tacky glue that holds the whole heliocentric model together.
And it is also an indisputable fact that any acceleration requires a force to produce it. This is how cars drive, planes fly, people walk, cats jump. It's how literally all motion works. Most of you address this problem by simply listing two words: density and buoyancy. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but these are not forces. Forces are vectors. They have a magnitude, which means a numerical amount, and a direction, which means they have to point somewhere. Density is simply mass per unit volume, or how much matter sits in a particular space. It doesn't point anywhere. And buoyancy is simply a measurement of an object's tendency to float. You say that objects fall down because they are more dense than the air below them. Why down? Why not up or sideways? When you let go of a ball, there is air all around it. How does it know to fall down? Also, objects fall down when they're in a vacuum, which means there is no air below them. What's happening there?
I could similarly ask
Point as well. When he does his when he discusses this, he says, "Oh, look, these are how objects fall in a vacuum." This is what people do to explain away it's in a vacuum. Okay, well, are we in a vacuum on Earth? No, we are not. Okay, so you gotta make sure that your experiments are in similar conditions to the to your comparison model.
If gravity is real and responsible for keeping all the world's buildings, oceans, and people stuck to the ground.
And the second law of thermodynamics is this is also a pressurized gaseous environment, since we're talking about that, because of the in the atmosphere, or the atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, it's made up of different gases like nitrogen and oxygen and helium and carbon, etc. And as per the second law of thermodynamics, a pressurized gaseous environment necessarily requires a container. So this is a contained environment. So how do you have, like a vacuum of space, which they're alleging is, the space is a vacuum, next to a non-vacuum? That makes any sense.
Then why does it have no effect on pulling down a simple children's balloon?
So just questions I have.
Are helium balloons magical anti-gravity devices? No. We live in a density gradient, and since the combination of plastic and helium present in the balloon is less dense than the nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and other elements in the air around it, it rises. Likewise, if I release the helium and then blow up the balloon again, the magical anti-gravity properties disappear because now it is denser than the air around it. But wait, I thought Professor Dave, he's not really a professor. Cool story though, bro. I thought not a Professor Dave said that it's an indisputable fact that all objects fall to the ground at 9.8 meters per second squared. Why doesn't a balloon filled with carbon dioxide fall at this indisputable rate? Gravity is clearly racist against balloons, feathers, and other objects with relative densities near that of the medium surrounding them.
I haven't
Come on,
watched this in
Dave.
so long.
So again, to answer your question, objects are not tending towards the Earth, they are tending towards their density equilibrium. The least dense gases rise highest, while the most dense
Exactly.
solids fall lowest. Here on Earth, so much solid matter has piled up in the dense direction that we actually have a platform to walk upon.
Yep.
But we are not yet at our density equilibrium, so we are constantly pushing downwards. Just as a helium balloon that rises and hits a ceiling has not yet reached its density equilibrium, and so it constantly pushes upwards on the ceiling.
Number 2, flat earthers all say, I shouldn't see this thing, but I do, so the earth is flat. Then to justify this claim, you all say the same thing, typically with no context whatsoever. 8 inches per mile squared.
This guy,
None of you
man.
have any idea what this means. You can't derive it. You can't calculate anything with it. You can't make a prediction with it. You can't tell me anything about this value at all. When I point this out to you, you get very
He's so funny. So I do want to say, before I get more into it, because the reason why I'm sharing this video is because, again, I was having a conversation, and there was the debate on whether I should hide these videos or not from my Rumble account and YouTube, because I do lose a lot of credibility, unfortunately, in the truther community or people that want to get news from me or updates because of this specific topic. And I get it, but I just wish people would be more open-minded, because again, I don't believe in reptiles, any of that stuff. A lot of people still do. They share this information with me on a regular basis. I still look at it. I've looked at so many other different versions of the earth that to me, like, I don't think makes sense, like the rising earth, like so many other ones. I don't believe in aliens. I don't believe in angels and demons, as to like what we're being led to believe in mainstream, and so many other things, right? And so like I feel like, again, so anyways, and so I'm like, well, okay, I'm like, we're having that conversation, and I'm like, you know what, based off of like how much misinformation there is out there, I'm like, I'm like, what are my reasons, my top 10 reasons why I've come to these conclusions? And so it took me like not even a minute, and I wrote these out, like just like I scribbled on a pad. It's like a little bit messy, but I'm like, okay. And so if someone was to ask me, which people don't ask me in person, and I don't bring it up in conversation, but if they were to ask me why I don't think that the earth is what is being taught or shown in mainstream, this is what I would say. So I already said, I already talked about the contained, because this being a pressurized gaseous environment requires a container. And so like, how are we leaving and going into outer space? If again, the Van Allen radiation belts, again, they would be lethal, and there's nothing that can leave those that can pass through and survive. And then my note here is weak force to explain water being pulled to the outside of a ball. Pilots don't adjust for curvature. And so and they stay at the same elevation, or they aim to, right? And again, multiple pilots have come out and said this on the record, and into my friggin' face. And I've shared a lot of proof on that, multiple. And they've said they don't account for curvature. And so they would necessarily, they would be going right out into space. And I'll show you a better visual of this. If it was what they say it is, this Earth with this curve. Okay, and so approximately 1,030 to 1,060 miles per hour at the equatorial area of an eastward spin, and like we don't feel any resistance or anything like that, especially if for aircrafts, because they're saying it's eastward. So if aircrafts are going the opposite direction, why are we not feeling resistance? There's different speeds that the Earth moves or travels, rather, depending on where you are on this alleged globe. And so like, how are we not feeling that, right? So there's significant differences between at the equatorial, like the Great Ring, where again, depending on what you look at, it's between 1,030 to 1,060 miles per hour. And then it goes down to like 800 miles per hour, 200 miles per hour at the alleged poles, 0 spin. And so how are we not feeling that? And so that's all explained away. And again, he's bringing this up now. So the Earth curve calculator that was provided to us by the experts, and so these are what we're using to show inconsistencies. And I talk about water seeking level. He's going to get into that. Larger bodies of water, not a drop of water. Okay, so the model has not been updated, like I said, and so they're still saying the circumference is 24,901 miles in circumference. And so this is where the Earth curve calculator comes into play. It's based on that math, and then the radius being a little under 4,000 miles, the diameter being a little under 8,000 miles, and so these are fixed distances that have been provided to us in lengths and things like that. And so this 8 inches per mile squared does become important, and he's going to share some images, and I will as well, that I've saved. And so again, I just have questions regarding that as well. So I've shared multiple government documents with technical data in it that has been declassified or archived that I was able to find. Over 44 different documents coming out of NASA, from aerospace engineering departments, and beyond that. And within these documents, it literally says flat, non-rotating Earth. And so, why? And then the predictable paths of the luminaries and the sun and the moon. And then I've discussed that at length. And the sun's travel path as well, and what I believe to be circuits or ring paths above us within this contained environment, just like Eudoxus, a great mathematician, scientist from the past, also explained, and many others. And so, anyways, I'm going to let them keep talking, and then I'll share the documents that they're talking about to back it up.
Very angry, and instead of answering simple questions, you just link me to a bunch of videos made by conmen. 8 inches per mile squared is not a valid way to measure Earth's curvature. If you understood math, you would immediately see that this squared on miles is totally out of place. That's because this is a parabolic approximation. This is for doing calculations with a parabola. It's possible that you remember this shape from middle school algebra, but I wouldn't be surprised if you don't. As you can see, the Earth is not shaped like this. So where does it come from, and why do people use it?
To begin with, the curvature formulas and curvature calculators that exist for the globe model were created by you globe Earth proponents, not us flat earthers. We are simply using the figures and formulas you yourselves claim as representing reality, and proving through easily observable, demonstrable, repeatable results that the alleged curvature does not exist. Non-Professor Dave tries to belittle flat earthers for using the parabolic 8 inches per mile squared approximation, but then refuses to mention the fact that this formula gives the same results as the more complicated trigonometrical formula for up to 300 miles, which is far longer than anyone needs for practical curvature observations. The fact that observers at sea level on clear days can see islands, buildings, and mountains, often over 50 to 100 miles away, completely destroys the assertion that we live on a ball 25,000 miles in circumference. Regardless of which curvature formula or curvature calculator used, you can even check the Metabunk or other globe apologist sites, input the figures, and see that these simple...
Look at this. And so he showed the Earth curve calculator. So I will share, because I've shared this for a few years now. And so this is the Pythagorean proof of curvature for a ball with a radius of 3,959 miles using AutoCAD 2015 with 15-digit precision. Okay, so you have here what I'm talking about. This at 0, 1,000, 2,000, going on beyond. So like what I was saying here is, like, let's say there was an aircraft flying from like the North Pole up here where the this hand is. If pilots don't factor in for curvature, so they would be going straight out into outer space. So anyways, we have here, so we have the miles here, we have feet and inches. And so at 3 miles, there would be, just so you see, there would be 6 feet of curvature, which we don't see when we zoom in on ships, on so many different things, on buildings across lakes or rivers or large bodies of water. So at 10 miles, there would be 66.68 feet of curvature at 10 miles. And I do know people, and I don't know if November is watching now, but he's actually gone out with people, and they have done these experiments where to calculate if you could see any obscuration based on curvature at at long distances, right, where there would absolutely be obscuration, and again consistently, right, like we see too far for these models, and they have not been updated. And Professor Dave is not a real professor; he doesn't know what he's talking about. And even Crow 777, I don't know why he chose that name, but anyway, he does he does videos, but he even shows with infrared how, I mean, it's even way beyond what you would be able to see based on these models. And then so again, using radar and sonar as well, like this has been interesting to say the least. And so why is that, right? So even with windmills in the ocean at 14, 16 miles away, so you know, it would be approximately like 200 feet of curvature. That's a lot. I'm 5'4". And so again, these are just questions I have. If people can answer those, that would be great. I'm definitely open to always looking more into data. And so I've never seen, and I was right off the Beta Chaleur, the Gaspé Peninsula, and I've never seen curved water looking out.
Observations are in
And water doesn't freeze curved either, like on you know, like large bodies of water.
complete defiance of the globe's math.
Again, I'm just saying.
Number 3,
I
all
know
flat
how that
earthers say
sounds,
the
but
same
it's
two
true.
things about water. The first is water doesn't curve, and the second is water finds its own level. The second phrase is completely meaningless, so the fact that you all say that exact thing verbatim is just one of the many demonstrations that you all blindly repeat what you hear without giving it a moment's thought. As for the first phrase, stating that water doesn't curve is at least a coherent thought. However, it is dead wrong. Put a drop of water on a piece of wax paper or a leaf. What does it look like? A freaking sphere. Isn't that something? In your haste to mindlessly parrot what you heard from flat earth priests about water, you forgot to look at water. Water curves, my friends. Look at this curved meniscus. Look at these waves. Water curves
He's
all the
so
time.
ridiculous.
Holy snarky strawman, Batman. Not really a Professor Dave is stooping to new levels of sarcastic sophistry. Let me try doing this with that condescending cadence he delivers so naturally. Well, Dave, water most certainly does find its own level, and that's why water has been used as the #1 most accurate leveling tool for thousands upon thousands of years. Water does not have the ability to stay piled upon itself, so it will always flow outwards towards the lowest uncontained point. Once contained, the surface of undisturbed water will always remain level, with no deviation in elevation from one point to any other. As for the straw man, water doesn't curve, Dave has conveniently shortened this to suit his narrative, when he should have said, large bodies of water at rest do not curve. The claim is large bodies of water sticking to and curving around a ball, not a single drop of water beating. That is a false equivalency and a straw man. We are not talking about the beating of a single drop of water, nor the meniscus in a glass of water, nor static electricity bending running water towards a comb. So any of these sophist examples put forth trying to prove curved water do nothing but show the desperation of these pseudoscientists to come up with such red herrings.
Number 4, you are all quite perplexed about how Earth's atmosphere can exist next to the vacuum of space. This one is rather amusing because what's happening is that since you have no science education, your only context for the word vacuum is a vacuum cleaner. And again, because you have no science education, none of you understand how a vacuum cleaner works, which is a problem because you seem to think that outer space is a vacuum cleaner. Let's take a moment and clear this up. A vacuum is any region where there is no stuff. Here, there is stuff, like air. In space, there is no stuff, or at least very, very close to no stuff. Space is essentially empty. That's a vacuum. It is not a thing that sucks. Vacuums don't suck. Everyone say it with me together. Vacuums don't suck.
Thanks so much for educating us on the subtle nuances and intricacies of how sucking works, Dave. I'm sure we all agree you are uniquely well qualified for explaining this subject. Unfortunately, though, your sucky straw man explanation still has not provided demonstrable proof of how a positive pressure system like Earth's atmosphere can exist adjacent to a negative pressure system like space without a solid barrier between the two. Anytime two opposing pressure systems come together without some solid membrane separating them, an equilibrium is quickly achieved. Nobody except Dave is saying space should suck Earth's atmosphere like a vacuum cleaner. We are saying, show us a demonstration of two opposing pressure systems without any solid barrier between them that do not equilibrate. If you cannot demonstrate this, but wish to claim this only happens at a scale too large for you to recreate, that is wishful thinking, not science.
Number 5, one of your favorite little gotcha challenges is to request that we demonstrate how water can stick to a ball spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. The implication is that water and everything else should fly off of it, like a child getting thrown from a merry-go-round. Well, it's very cute that you get overwhelmed by numbers with 4 digits in them, but in actuality, the Earth spins once per day. one time in 24 hours. Get on a merry-go-round and have someone push you one time around over 24 hours. Not a very thrilling ride, is it? The issue is that the Earth is really, really big. So if instead of using rotational velocity to describe a rotating body, like a normal person, you try to use linear tangential velocity, you're going to get a pretty big number. But to be honest, it's still not really that big.
It seems you're the one getting overwhelmed by your own.
So this is in kilometers, not in miles. And yeah, so we don't feel 1,275 kilometers per hour in some areas. Yeah, like when I go from like 60 kilometers an hour in my Jeep to 100, like I feel that.
Globe figures, Dave.
Especially
The
with the
alleged
windows down.
speed at which your tilting,
No, no.
wobbling, spinning space
do you
testicle
think?
Earth is actually supposed to rotate at the equator is 1,039 miles per hour. We are all well aware that this means one rotation per day, but thanks for continuing to speak to your audience like illiterate, petulant children and pretending we cannot understand such basic concepts.
Furthermore, this little water doesn't stick to a ball challenge is the strawiest straw man that was ever made of straw. The Earth is huge. It generates an enormous gravitational field. That's why everything sticks to it. A ball is very tiny. It does not generate an enormous gravitational field, so things don't stick to it.
So again, just like your last point, you cannot demonstrate water curving around and sticking to a ball, but wish to
It's an electromagnetic reality, and it's toroidal field, magnetic fields, not gravity fields.
claim it only happens on a scale too large for you to recreate. That is no different from me claiming that unicorns exist, and when asked to show a single example of one, I cannot, but instead I say, unicorns do too exist, but they are macrocosmic invisible unicorns that cannot be observed. Invisible macrocosmic unicorns may exist in Dave's fantasy delusions, but if he cannot show a single demonstrable evidential example, it is by definition not scientific.
Number 6. Lots of you say that moonlight is cold. This is astonishing for a number of reasons. The first is that it is not related to any claim you could possibly be making in order to argue for a flat Earth. But the second, and much more important detail, is that it is the perfect demonstration of the fact that you have no clue how science works. Some flat Earth priest measured the temperature under the moonlight and then again under something providing shade. Wow, moonlight makes it colder. But does it? Shouldn't you add some element of control to your experiment? What's a control, you ask? You see, your measurement isn't evidence of anything. You now have to repeat the experiment when there is no moonlight to make sure that the moonlight was indeed the cause of the discrepancy in temperature. This is something you should have learned in middle school, but don't worry, I'll finish the experiment for you. Take the measurements again on a night with a new moon so that there is no moonlight. Look at that. You'll get the same result. So the moonlight absolutely wasn't the reason for the discrepancy in temperature.
There are countless videos proving moonlight to be colder than moonshade, including peer-reviewed published experiments like in the Lancet Journal. People can perform their own research on this topic, but I have to point out the obvious flaw Dave seems to have overlooked while he was so busy talking down to his audience. Dave assumes we don't know what a control is and insists that doing the experiment on different days during different phases of the moon will give different temperatures. Yes, Dave, of course it will, because it's a different day. Control experiments must be done simultaneously for them to be able to control for anything. Redoing the experiment under different conditions on a different day is anything but a control. Regardless, the experiment has been done countless times by different people with the same results. Moonlight, especially during the full moon, is colder than moonshade. You did get one thing right, though, and that is that this, once again, has nothing to do with flat Earth. It's funny how desperate you are to come up with 10 things all flat earthers supposedly say, yet several of your examples are just random red herrings that have nothing to do with the shape of the Earth.
Yep.
Number 7.
Over 8 million views, right? And it's number 1 on the list. So whenever people, like I've gotten sent that video, which is why I'm sharing it again, probably like over 100 times at this point, because again, it's like 6 years old. And I've shared Eric Dubé's video countering it. I've shared other videos countering it. I've done my signals, voice recordings, like explaining so many different things as to why. And so again, I'm just like, I'm open-minded in this, right? I'm trying to be unbiased. And so if you can't answer this, maybe look more into it. I don't know.
Many of you say some unintelligible nonsense about water flowing uphill, or that on the globe model, some rivers flow uphill. This one is so stupid that I genuinely can't believe any human could fall for it. You'll look at a globe and say that a river flows this way and that this is somehow uphill, because you seem to think that up on the screen is some kind of universal up in space. Listen up. There is no up and down in space. This is not up. This is not down. To believe so would be as dumb as thinking that on Earth, whichever way you happen to be facing is north. No one on Earth is upside down or on their side. Up on
Oh
Earth
my
is
goodness.
away from the surface of the Earth.
This is I don't remember what Eric Dubé says, but you would actually have to believe, and this is what a strong argument is as well. It's that if you're in like the southern region, like you'll see on this model, everything's upside down, and so rain coming from, I'll show it in here. This area here, it would be flowing up, going up. Here would be going sideways.
Earth, no matter where you are on the Earth.
And we'd be walking upside down and sideways. That's a fact. That's a fact based on their model. So he's saying there's no up and down. There absolutely necessarily there is a identified center that's necessary in order to even make any form of measurements and assessments.
And yet another example of globe earthers trying to make common sense sound like nonsense, we hear that up is not up and down is not down. People live stuck all around a ball Earth, but nobody is sideways or upside down. Globe believers hate thinking about people being sideways or upside down on their silly ball, so they just claim there is no such thing as up or down to calm their fevered brains. But regardless of their internal mind games, their ball model has people stuck at any and all of 360-degree inclinations around the thing, which means people would by necessity be walking around sideways and upside down relative to one another. Likewise, Earth's many hundreds of rivers are constantly flowing north, south, east, west, and every other intermediary direction simultaneously, some of which flow for hundreds of miles with only the slightest of change in elevation. An absolute impossibility on a globe of given proportions.
I've been on the Nile.
Number 8. Many flat earthers remain dumbfounded by the idea that the Earth is slightly closer to the sun in winter than in summer. As I've said before, winter up north is summer down south and vice versa. So your confusion is one of northern hemisphere narcissism, but it is also one of complete ignorance. Here's the Earth. Here's the light coming from the sun. Look at this portion. It hits the Earth straight on. Look at this portion. Because of the curvature of the Earth, the light hits the surface at an angle and is therefore distributed around a greater area. Same amount of heat distributed around a larger area, lower average temperature. This is absolutely trivial to understand.
Thanks, Dave. Nobody is dumbfounded or confused about these simple pseudoscientific claims you're making. We're simply presenting the inconsistencies of your model to you in question form because we're used to thinking for ourselves and allowing others to think for themselves rather than condescendingly talking down to everyone from a pedestal like you're some infallible superior being armed with objective truth. The question is simple. How can the globe model purport the sun to be approximately 3 million miles closer to Earth in January, when winter and colder temperatures are found all over the Earth, than in July, when Earth experiences its warmest temperatures? Dave claims due to the ball Earth's tilt, different places receive different amounts of direct sunlight, and that is what produces the seasonal and temperature changes. This makes no sense, however, because if the sun's heat travels over 90 million miles to reach the ball Earth, how could a slight tilt, a mere few thousand miles maximum, negate the sun's 90 million mile journey, giving us simultaneous tropical summers and Antarctic winters? Ball believers also say the sun is 1 million times larger than the Earth, so regardless of how you tilt the globe, there will still be plenty of direct sunlight.
Number 9. Many flat earthers refer to the body of scientific knowledge as science.
And there's localized hotspots that we see, and again, just with the sun's rays, I'm gonna further unpack some things. Again, I don't want to be too long, and I really appreciate that people are sticking with me on this because I know how this sounds. And so he talks about the Professor Dave I'm talking about. He talks about the tilt being 23.4 degrees, etc. And so technically, like how it's being explained in the globe model, let's say, or his model, that like it could it works on the heliocentric and geocentric version of reality, if that makes any sense. And so and they can't steelman this. And so if you see here, this is again what's common in the scientific community is that the sun does travel the Tropic of Cancer, it travels the equatorial ring, and it travels the Tropic of Capricorn, and these are on a lot of maps. And so here is an Alex Gleason map, just to give a visual representation of what I'm talking about, what I believe to be the sun's travel path above us, circular rings, and then again maintaining this average speed of 24 um, approximately 24,000 miles per day, traveling at approximately 1,000 miles per hour, going passing through or within the zodiacal belt. These 12 zodiacal signs, or the Mazzaroth, whatever you want to call it, and never deviating. So the sun never travels beyond this belt, and neither do the other luminaries. And there's varying degrees of speeds and distances they travel, what I think to be above us within these rings. That again, even Eudoxus talks about. So, anyways, I'm getting off path here, but so when the sun travels the Tropic of Cancer, as we can see, this is the equator, so Tropic of Cancer right here. When the sun is traveling the Tropic of Cancer, closest to the center or the North Pole area, this is where in this region there are multiple days where the sun doesn't appear to set. Like you have it's constant sunlight, daylight. And this is where we experience our summer months in the northern regions, or closest to the north here. And so this is where the sun's traveling 23.4 degrees north latitude of the equatorial ring. It never travels beyond that latitude. Okay, that's the closest it gets. Okay, so like that's its boundary to the north. And so because it's a smaller ring path, it does also travel slower in order to maintain that 24-hour clock, if that makes any sense. And then so it's on or around the 20th or the 21st of June of every single year. This is where, again, the sun is the closest, and where we have the longest days, the shortest nights in the northern regions. And then it starts its descent from the highest point. And again, it maps out, when you map it out, it creates a sine wave. I can show that as well as a visual representation to just understand what I'm saying. Actually, maybe I'll do that as well. But before I get into that anyway, so and then it goes back towards the equator, or the equatorial ring, where we have the spring and fall equinoxes, where on the northern and southern regions, we experience equal amount of day and night. Okay, these are all facts. And then it goes beyond that to its southernmost ring path, the Tropic of Capricorn. And this is where in the northern regions, because the sun is further away by anyways, and these are measurable distances as well, right? So 23.4 degrees, I believe it's like 1,600 miles or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but under 2,000 miles. And so, which is why I also think, I'm going to reiterate that I don't think it's 93 million miles away. The inverse square law debunks that as well, and so many other reasons. But anyway, so it's 23.4 degrees south latitude of the equatorial ring. It never goes beyond that latitude. Where we experience, again, winter. And on or around the 21st of December of every single year, we have the winter solstice, where we have the longest nights in the northern regions and the shortest days. And this is where for 3 days ish, it appears that that's like there's the same amount of daylight and night, and then it starts its ascent from the lowest point it ever travels. So it's dead, lowest point it ever travels, where we have like the winter months, where this is where, even Saturn, it rules over Capricorn and Aquarius. And that's why I believe that hell is, it's cold, not hot. And I've talked about that as well, but I don't want to get too much into this because I'm deviating. Oh yeah. So, and this is why there's so many different stories throughout history of on the 25th of December-ish, this is where we have these births of these deities or these prophets or these gods, etc. Like Mithras, Dionysus, Horus, Jesus, Krishna. Like there's just so many stories. Ra, and I believe it has to do with the sun's travel path and people's different interpretations of the cosmos and the creation story. And where was it going with that? Okay, so yeah, then we have winter, and then the sun moves back up towards the equator, and then we have the spring equinox again. And this is where some people believe it's the start of the new year, when the sun enters into Aries. And so on or around the 20th or the 21st of March of every single year, depending on if it's a leap year or a non-leap year. And even talking about the zodiacal belt and the constellations, like that's a whole other story, right? Because we've divided it up perfectly into like 30 degrees, but some constellations are significantly smaller than others, and the sun's travel path and the moon's travel path throughout these constellations, it's longer for some signs than others. But anyways, and so when people say like, oh, like flat earthers are dumb because like how can they explain like leaving one area and traveling east or whatever you want to call it or west and not falling off your model, and so there's so many things I could say about that where it's not the model we believe in. But so like let's say you're, I don't know, here in, like I'm just gonna put Canada here, and you travel. If you circumnavigate, whatever you want to call it, you can travel. I hope you see this mouse hand, and you can make it back to the same area. There you go. Easy. Same thing. Just travel around. So we've been able to circumnavigate going this way, but not going from north to south. And people have tried, and it's taken over 3 years, over 69,000 miles. And so very interesting. And why? And why? So yeah, this is not, so what I'm saying is like, I'm not just sharing videos and not understanding what they mean before I share them. And it took me a few years before I started sharing these videos because like I wanted to make sure that, I had enough information gathered before I threw out something this wild, that sounds so wild. Like I'm talking to people that have like PhD engineers, like about this stuff. And I debated Craig, and he's a nuclear engineer, and I definitely won that debate. I shared a lot of good data and called out some of the information that they were providing that was completely ridiculous and didn't strengthen their model at all or their argument. And so I asked them to even pull back up that photo. I'm like, this is your argument for gravity or wind resistance or whatever, and you're showing like a wall. Anyway, back to the show.
Scientism. This is meant to be derogatory, implying that science is a religion. I'm very sorry, but saying this just demonstrates that you know nothing about science and probably didn't pass a single science class in high school. Science students are not told what to believe. They are shown how to perform experiments. Even in high school physics, students use blocks and ramps and balls and pendulums and carts and rulers and timers to derive Newton's laws and many other such pillars of science. So using the word scientism only serves to disqualify you from adult conversation regarding science. In actuality, it is quite clear why you adopt this viewpoint, because you just accept whatever you hear if it's what you want to believe. This is why your beliefs are baseless. Since you are incapable of doing anything other than repeating what you are told, you assume that others are doing the same thing, but they are not.
Scientism is simply another way of saying pseudoscience. For example, when you claim that bodies of water can curve around, stick to objects, and display the shape of said objects upon their surface, like the alleged ball Earth under your alleged curved oceans, but cannot give a single demonstrable example on a scale small enough to recreate, that is called scientism, or pseudoscience. Likewise, when you claim that opposing pressure systems can exist side by side without a solid barrier between them, but cannot provide a single evidential example of this claim, you are spouting more scientism.
And to wrap things up, number 10, the pièce de résistance, the claim that we have all been indoctrinated, that we have been brainwashed by schools, by the government, by NASA, by Freemasons, by Hollywood. Take your pick. Well, as I have demonstrated in this clip, you all say the same exact ridiculous things word for word, like you're reciting the oath of the Flat Earth Fraternity. So it's a rather silly accusation to be throwing around. The fact that you all say the same things is not surprising in the slightest.
He needs to check out Werner von Braun. He needs to check out Project Paperclip. He needs to check out Annie Jacobson and what she's exposed regarding that, and the propaganda and the psychological operations that were implemented during the time that he and countless other scientists came into the US and into Canada, and what developed afterwards, what departments and organizations and agencies. And and so those are big rabbit holes. I've done countless videos on those if you want to see them.
What do you do when you want to brainwash someone? You tell them they have already been brainwashed.
Yes, globe earthers say flat earthers have been brainwashed, and flat earthers say globe earthers have been brainwashed.
I don't
But
say
think about
brainwashed.
this. Globe
Lied to.
earthers are simply advocating the first version of reality they were taught as little children. Meanwhile, all flat earthers were actually taught that exact same version of reality as children, the only difference being that they went back as adults and did their due diligence in researching the opposing arguments without any bias or cognitive dissonance to see whether or not what they were taught as children still stood up to the critical scrutiny of a discerning adult. Then, after doing so, and finding fatal flaws in the model, these discerning adults went against all of society, enduring endless insults and ridicule, many losing friends and family members in the process,
Yep.
all for daring to question this globe gospel. So tell me, Professor, who sounds more brainwashed? The diligent and discerning adults able to override their initial bias and cognitive dissonance enough to research and reach a completely opposite understanding of that which was first taught to them? Or those who simply continued believing what they were originally taught as children?
And so, yeah, it was a great video. I'm just gonna shut this down. And I might show just one more image that I pulled up just to show some context here. And yeah, it's unfortunate that I don't even bring this up in conversation, like I said, but it continually gets brought up to me as a way to like make it like like make me lose credibility. And and I consistently say, this topic, like it requires a lot more time and consideration, like to get into, and and yeah, and so we can go through it or not, but just anyway. So here is I have done videos on this. I think this might be the image that is the thumbnail for it if you want to do a quick search. But I threw this into AI programs to verify the validity of whether these ancient civilizations and cultures had this as their model of their interpretation of what this cosmos was. And for the majority of these groups, um, it was confirmed that this was what they believed the model to look like. Again, this is just a visual representation, and so you've got Greek, Navajo, Babylonian, Mesa, and I break down also through the AI programs if you want to see it. I think ChatGPT as well, as to like their beliefs and who their gods were, who they worshipped, whether they were pagan or not, or monotheistic or polytheistic, etc. Very interesting stuff, and and a lot of similarities again between these creation stories and parallels, despite not even interacting with each other from completely different periods. And so you'll see here, it's just very interesting that it seems to be a contained environment. It seems to be that things are projected onto a flat plane of inertia, obviously with with bodies of water and with hills and with mountains and with valleys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Japanese, Persian, Viking believe that there was some kind of a large tree at the center of the earth. I thought that was very interesting because there are a lot of people that believe there's some kind of a mountain like Rupus Nigris or Mount Meru, whatever you want to call it, that is some kind of a black mountain or black stone that is magnetic, and what's providing these magnetic fields or toroidal fields. Mayan, Incan, Hebrew here. If it will clear up a little bit, it's a little bit glitchy with like oil, what they call shul underneath. Yeah, so just very interesting. Mother Earth for Australia. So yeah, in many of these, again, it's contained. There's some kind of like flat plane of inertia, and so even people say talking about like falling off the earth. No one's saying that. There's this thing called the Flat Earth Society. This is funded by the government, I'm convinced, and this is propaganda. So I've looked on that site like a few times, and I'm like, like sometimes there's good stuff, but I'm like, there's so much bullshit here that has nothing to do with it, with what we believe at all, and it's actually discrediting us. And so people are referencing that too with stuff they're giving me, and I'm like, we don't believe any of this stuff either. Like, this is so stupid. They're giving me pancakes, and they're like, oh, is this what you believe? A flat disc in space? I'm like, no, I don't. Like, no one I know in the flat Earth community or whatever you want to call it believe that at all. And so again, I don't even want to be identified as just that, because I've given so many different examples of things I can talk about that are less controversial. I said about COVID, digital ID stuff, carbon credit stuff, immigration, wars, January 6th, Freedom Convoy. I can talk a lot about that. Talk a lot about crisis actors because I've used them before. and I've been tracking them and monitoring them internationally, because there are repeat ones that are also radicalized to say the least, and more terrorist in they're terroristic, just like the Antifa. I believe that it was a correct decision to classify them as a terrorist organization, because they are. The Challenger hoax, Iran Contra, Charlie Kirk. There's so many things I can talk about. So again, this topic keeps on coming up as a way to discredit me. And but again, answer those questions. I think on that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.